Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Monday, April 5th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. It's been a very, very busy day. A lot of people were late getting to work or getting to their living room or their home office because they're still working at home because of COVID, because a lot of people were up last night watching Earth, Wind, and Fire versus the Isley brothers. Okay, I was watching as well. I was posting pictures of the two groups, the two iconic groups. Many people are saying that was the best Verzuz that's taking place. You know, they broadcast it on Instagram versus TV. I think it is on Instagram, and many people were posting about it yesterday, and Ron Isley and his beard were going viral. He announced he's 79 years old. He doesn't look it. So, you know, it was a great iconic battle, two great groups. And I posted on Facebook today, you know, I can't get the song Summer Breeze out of my head. Okay. Because they performed all their hits last night. And, you know, so I got to pull out my Isley Brothers. I have the Isley Brothers on CD. I have Earth, Wind, and Fire's greatest hits. So I think there were a lot of babies conceived last night also. Okay. I'm just saying. I think there were a lot of babies conceived last night. So 9 months from now, you're going to have babies named Ron and Verdine and and Ernie. So Steve. So we'll see what happens. But we'll talk about Verzuz later in the show. I want to see Kool in the Gang versus Cameo, right? Word up. I want to see Kool in the Gang versus Cameo. Okay. I also want to see Apollonia 6 versus the Mary Jane Girls, but that's another conversation. But we'll talk some about Verzuz towards the end of the show. We'll try to squeeze some more of that conversation in. But on today's show, today was day 6 of the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. And I mean, it wasn't as emotional as last week, but there was some very damaging testimony that came out today that damaged the defense. You had the police chief, Chief Madaria Arredondo. You had the police chief that testified today and testified that having your knee on the suspect's neck for an extended period of time is not policy, okay, for the Minneapolis Police Department. It's not part of their training. And then also you had Dr. Bradford Lagenfeld, who was the doctor who pronounced George Floyd dead and provided medical attention for George Floyd at the hospital. And he said that George Floyd's heart had already stopped by the time he had arrived at the hospital, and that he believed that asphyxia or oxygen deficiency was more likely the cause of George Floyd's cardiac arrest. Asphyxia or oxygen deficiency. Now, in the autopsy, the medical examiner did not mention asphyxia. And we know the medical examiner is going to testify probably this week. Okay. So we'll talk about some of the testimony that took place today. Once again, very damaging for the defense. And also, I didn't get a chance to talk about it Friday. You know, I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered Friday. We shared some of that, some of what happened on our Friday show. But there's a good article from NBC News. So in Georgia, we know that the protests in Georgia are heating up. More calls for growing calls for economic boycotts of certain corporations that are not coming out, certain Georgia-based corporations that are not coming out in force, in opposition against these Jim Crow era voter restriction bills. Okay, so there is a economic boycott that is supposed to start on Wednesday. Okay, and we'll talk some about that. And we know that Bishop Reginald Jackson announced a boycott of Coca-Cola products outside of the Georgia Capitol on Thursday, March 25th. We'll give you an update on what's going on, but there's a big article from NBC News. Corporate America is wading into the voting rights battle. Corporate America is wading into WADING, wading into the voter rights battle. And there's been pressure that has been put on these various corporations. We've been talking about that, whether it's from Black Voters Matter, LaTosha Brown and Cliff Albright, whether it's other organizations, other activists, whether it's the New Georgia Project, NSA UFA. There's been tremendous pressure that has been put on them. So the companies now we know these companies had offered cautious statements over the past couple of weeks or so, but last Wednesday, and we talked about this on the show as well, last Wednesday, March 31st, things changed and the pressure ramped up on these corporations. All right. We also saw that 72 African-American executives signed onto a letter condemning these voter restriction bills also. We talked about that last week on the show. All right, so we'll give you an update on what's going on here as well. We have to keep the pressure up. The Brennan Center for Justice now estimates that it's about 361 bills, I think it is, in 47 states as of March 24th. Okay, it was about 253 bills in 43 states. Now it's 361 bills, 361 voter restriction bills in 47 states as of March 24th. So as I've said before, the Republicans have declared war on us, on our voting rights, as well as many Hispanics and younger people who vote, people who tend to lean towards Democratic candidates. They've declared war on us, but especially African Americans. So this is why we have to fight back, and we have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics. We have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk a little bit about the verses between Earth, Wind, and Fire and the Isley brothers. All right. And everybody looked good. Ron Isley looked good. I wanted them to perform, from the Steve Harvey show, where he's a high school teacher. I wanted them to perform When the Funk Hits the Fan from Steve Hightower and the High Tops. Okay, because that's the funk band that he used to be the leader of on the TV show. And they have this song. If you haven't seen the show, I don't know why you haven't seen the Steve Harvey show. Okay, with Wendy Raquel Robinson and Cedric the Entertainer and Terry J. Vaughn, Lita Lovita Alizé Jenkins. Okay, Lovita Alizé Jenkins. But you have When the Funk Hits the Fan, and also the other big hit that I really wanted them to perform was Break Me Off a Piece of That Funk. They didn't perform either one of those songs last night, but the songs they performed last night, they were okay. But I wanted to hear When the Funk Hits the Fan, right? And Break Me Off a Piece of That Funk. Okay, so all right. So we'll discuss that some later on in the show. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or a woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you'd like to stop for information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. All right, we're coming up here on the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by, everybody. Stand by, we're on break. We're back from break in just a minute here, and about 3 minutes or so. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. All right, how's everybody doing today? Stand by, everybody. Okay, stand by. All right, back from break in 2 minutes. Okay, we got Sharon, TC, Miss Lloyd. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Monday, April 5th, 2021, and we're live. Hope everybody's doing well. You know, a lot of people were late to work or they were sleepy at work today. They were dragging people around. A lot of people at work today were talking about the Verzuz that took place on Easter Sunday, April 4th, 2021, between two iconic groups, Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Elements versus the Isley brothers. Many people are saying the Isley brothers won. I mean, it was fantastic. Steve Harvey was the host. He was the MC. You had D Nice as the DJ. You know, I mean that I think at one point I was watching it live on Instagram. I know it surpassed 400,000 viewers at one point. I think it got close to 500,000 viewers. So that may have been the most watched Verzuz so far. Okay, but we'll talk some more about that later. I want to jump into what took place day 6. Okay, what took place today, day 6 of the Derek Chauvin trial. We're going to go to clip number 1 here in just a minute, Shakita. So we heard from two very, very important witnesses today. We heard from Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arredondo, and the chief testified at the chief testified today at the trial. Now, he was the police chief who fired Derek Chauvin the day after George Floyd's death, along with 3 other officers who were at the scene. Now, Police Chief Arredondo took the witness stand as a witness for the prosecution today in the Chauvin trial. Now, it's important for people to understand also. I said this on Charlene Mitchell's show Thursday. last Thursday. I was on Charlene Mitchell's show here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation. Mind your business. The defense has not presented their case yet. These are the prosecution's witnesses. This is the prosecution's case. The defense, led by Eric Nelson, they're doing cross-examination, but they have not presented their case yet. Once the prosecution presents its case, the prosecution will rest. Then, in general, usually the prosecution will rest. Then the defense will then present their case, bring forth their witnesses, their medical experts, etc. They will present their case. So the defense, even though they've telegraphed, they're going to say he overdosed, George Floyd overdosed, and things like this. The defense has not presented their case yet. So I just want people to understand this. It's expected, in general, the trial will go between 2 to 4 weeks. So Chief Arredondo testified about the department's code of ethics and de-escalation policies that are used to train officers. Quote, the goal is to resolve the situation as safely as possible. The goal is to resolve the situation as safely as possible. So you want to always have de-escalation layered into these actions of using force. He testified today. Now, Chauvin's defense has sought to portray the crowd that had gathered to witness and record the officers restraining George Floyd as an angry mob that diverted their attention away from Floyd. But in testimony last week, we see it was not an angry mob. They were just concerned about George Floyd, and they were trying to get him some type of medical attention and trying to get Derek Chauvin to take his knee off of George Floyd's neck. But it was not an angry mob. It was not a violent mob or something like this, like the defense is trying to portray. What people have to understand is the crowd was responding to largely what Derek Chauvin was doing to George Floyd. The crowd was largely responding to what Derek Chauvin was doing to George Floyd. If you had gotten up off of him, off of George Floyd, the crowd would have calmed down. Now, but Chief Arredondo said that while some officers may find it, quote unquote, irritating to be recorded, the public has an absolute First Amendment right, quote unquote, an absolute First Amendment right to do so under the department's policy. Now, before Chief Arredondo testified, we also heard testimony from the emergency room doctor who pronounced George Floyd dead and tried to resuscitate him. That's Dr. Bradford Lagenfeld. We're going to go, I'll let you hear some of his testimony in just a minute. But first, we're going to go to clip number 1 here from MSNBC dealing with Chief Arredondo's testimony. Minneapolis police chief says Chauvin restraint on Floyd, quote unquote, violates our policy. Let's go to clip 1, Shakita.
In your review of all of the information that you just mentioned, do you believe that the defendant followed departmental policy 5-304 regarding de-escalation?
I absolutely do not agree with that.
How so?
That action is not de-escalation. And when we talk about the framework of our sanctity of life, and when we talk about the principles and values that we have, that action goes contrary to what we're talking.
As you reflect on Exhibit 17, I must ask you, is this a trained Minneapolis Police Department defensive tactics technique?
It is not.
Well, we read the departmental policy on neck restraints. Is this a neck restraint?
The conscious neck restraint by policy mentions light to moderate pressure. When I look at Exhibit 17, and when I look at the facial expression of Mr. Floyd, that does not appear in any way, shape, or form that is light to moderate pressure.
So is it your belief then that this particular form of restraint, if that's what we'll call it, in fact violates departmental policy?
I absolutely agree that violates our policy.
Are you aware now that the defendant maintained this position on George Floyd for 9 minutes and 29 seconds?
I am aware of that.
I believe you testified that force has to be reasonable when it's applied at the beginning and through the entire encounter. Is that right?
That is correct.
Is what you see in Exhibit 17, in your opinion, within Minneapolis Police Departmental Policy 5-300, authorizing the use of reasonable force?
It is not.
And why not?
It has to be objectively reasonable. We have to take into account circumstances, information, the threat to the officer, the threat to others, and the severity of that. So that is not part of our policy. That is not what we teach, and that should be condoned.
When do you believe, or do you have a belief as to when this restraint, the restraint on the ground that you viewed, should have stopped?
Once Mr. Floyd, and this is based on my viewing of the videos, once Mr. Floyd had stopped resisting, and certainly once he was in distress and trying to verbalize that, that should have stopped. There's an initial reasonableness in trying to just get him under control in the first few seconds, but once there was no longer any resistance, and clearly when Mr. Floyd was no longer responsive and even motionless, to continue to apply that level of force to a person proned out, handcuffed behind their back, that in no way, shape, or form is anything that is by policy. It's not part of our training, and it is certainly not part of our ethics or our values.
Sir, based on your review of the video and based on your own experience and training as an MPD officer, did you see signs during the encounter that Mr. Floyd was exhibiting indicia of being in medical distress?
Yes. Yes.
And you saw at one point, I think you just testified that Mr. Floyd was unresponsive.
That is correct.
And that officers, were you aware that officers couldn't find a pulse?
Could you repeat that, sir?
And were you aware that officers at the time of the restraint were unable to find a pulse?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And so stated.
I was aware that the officers were not able to find a pulse. Yes.
Did you see the defendant or any of the officers attempt to provide first aid to Mr. Floyd?
I did not see any of the defendants try to attempt to provide first aid to Mr. Floyd.
The defendant did not try CPR. He did not start chest compressions.
Sustain is leading. Rephrase.
Did you see them provide any medical attention?
I did not.
Okay. Yeah, pause it right there. All right. So that was very, very damaging testimony that Chief Arredondo gave today. Truthful, but damaging to the defense. And he was saying that that use of deadly force to someone that's laying down in a prone position on their stomach, handcuffed behind their back, okay, for an extended period of time, using force like that, knee to the neck, that doesn't fall in line with department policy. But also, the force continued after George Floyd had stopped moving. He stopped talking, he stopped moving, and Derek Chauvin's knee was still on George Floyd's neck. So it's very damaging testimony from Chief Arredondo today. He said, in no way, shape, or form is anything that is set by policy. Okay. Now, I want to go to, let's see, we're going to go to, I want to go to clip 2. Chief Arredondo also today on the witness stand talked about policy of policing when it comes to the Minneapolis Police Department's Code of Ethics. And he testified that officers follow a quote unquote professional policing policy, and must treat people with dignity and respect. Now, we know all of them don't do it, but this is what the chief is saying, and this is the policy in the Minneapolis Police Department. Let's go to clip 2, Shakita.
This police department has a code of ethics, is that right?
Yes.
And the code of ethics is contained within the policy manual. Forgive me, we're going to be talking a lot about the policy manual and kind of march through some of these, but the code of ethics, if you could please display Exhibit 215, page 2, and if you could highlight 5-10201. And as the Code of Ethics provides in the policy manual, law enforcement officers' fundamental duty to serve mankind and safeguard lives and property, and to protect the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression and intimidation. Is that right?
That is correct.
And if you could take that down, Minneapolis Police Department also has a professional policing policy. Is that right?
Yes.
At a high level, can you describe what professional policing means in this context?
Yes, our Minneapolis Police Department professional policing, it's really about treating people with dignity and respect. Above all else, at the highest level, it's that we see each other as necessary, we value one another, and it's really treating people with the dignity and respect they deserve.
If we could display then Exhibit 215. And drawing your attention to page 4, section 5-104.01. Sir, is this the professional policing policy?
Yes, it is.
And could you read the first bullet, please?
The first bullet reads, "Be courteous, respectful, polite, and professional."
And if you would then also read the third bullet.
Ensure that the length of any detention is no longer than necessary to take appropriate action for the known or suspected offense.
Okay. Pause it right there. Pause it right there. Okay. So there's Chief Arredondo also testifying to the policy, the Code of Ethics, dealing with the Minneapolis Police Department as well. Professional policing policy. Okay. And from all accounts, it appears that Derek Chauvin didn't follow that on May 25th, 2020. Now, I want to look at here. We're going to go to clip 3 here in just a second, Shakita. I want to look at the updates here from the Washington Post. Now, everyone is saying how it's unusual for a police chief to testify, especially in a case this high level, against a officer, subordinate officer, what have you. But it's happened before. This is the second time Chief Arredondo has testified while a Minneapolis police officer stood trial for murder. It happened back in 2019 when Officer Muhammad Noor was on trial for shooting and killing Justine Diamond. We remember this case also. This is the white woman who was shot and killed. It was said that she startled the officer. He was in his patrol car and he shot her, killed her. He's in prison now. Okay. I want to look at this. I'm going to pull this up here from Washington Post. Let me turn on the screen share, flip back over here. Just 1 second. Calling number is 313-778-7600. If you have a quick question or comment, 313-778-7600. If you have a quick question or comment. So when we look at the updates from the Washington Post, Chief Arredono's testimony was among the most anticipated moments in the trial. Yeah, and it originally was supposed to take place last Friday, but they only had a half a day of testimony last Friday. In part because this kind of appearance on the stand is so unusual. It's remarkably rare for a police chief to take the stand against one of their officers, experts say. Now, even more striking is that this is the second time that Chief Arredondo, who is African American, but people can't tell or haven't seen him before. Even more striking is that this is the second time Chief Arredondo has testified while a Minneapolis police officer stood trial for murder. In 2019, he testified when Officer Muhammad Noor was on trial for shooting and killing Justine Diamond, a woman who had called 911 to report hearing a possible sexual assault. That shooting in 2017, so the shooting took place in 2017, trial was in 2019. That shooting in 2017 and the ensuing outcry helped Chief Arredondo become police chief in the first place. Now, he's the first African American police chief in the Minneapolis Police Department. Now, amid the uproar over the shooting, the city's police chief, Jani Harto, was forced out, and Arredondo stepped into the role, becoming the department's first Black chief. Now, Arredondo's testimony also has been widely anticipated because having a sitting police chief testify in uniform provides a powerful voice for the prosecution. Having a sitting police chief testify in uniform provides a powerful voice for the prosecution. Now, Arredondo's testimony could be viewed as speaking on behalf of the city's entire police department, whether or not he intends his remarks that way. His testimony, along with those from veteran police officers last week, okay, like Lieutenant Zimmerman, as well, who was a homicide detective and a very senior homicide detective, Lieutenant Zimmerman, and then also we heard from Derek Chauvin's former supervisor as well last week. Now, his testimony, along with those from veteran police officials last week, also seem aimed at the defense's argument that Derek Chauvin was following police training while kneeling on George Floyd. While cross-examining the chief, Eric Nelson, Chauvin's defense attorney, subtly alluded to the threats police face, noting that they could confront dangers during even commonplace moments like traffic stops. Now, the defense attorney, he was throwing out all these hypotheticals. Toward the end of Chief Arredondo's testimony, we'll go to the phone lines in just a minute. Toward the end of Chief Arredondo's testimony, he then throws out this hypothetical if he and Chief Arredondo are in the gun battle, okay? If the two of them are in the gun battle and Arredondo shoots at Nelson, the defense attorney, Nelson is going to neutralize the threat before if his partner is hurt, if Nelson's partner is hurt, he's a police officer. If his partner is hurt, laying on the ground, then he's going to return fire, neutralize the threat before he gives medical attention to his partner. Well, that hypothetical sounds good, but the problem is George Floyd was unarmed. George Floyd didn't have a gun. He wasn't shooting at anybody. George Floyd was unarmed. So when you watch it, because I watched almost all of the trial today, he's throwing out all these nonsensical hypotheticals. Because I mean, he was dealt a bad hand in the first place. Because look who his client is. Look at the video evidence. But he's throwing out all these hypotheticals. And a lot of this stuff really don't have anything to do with this specific case. George Floyd was unarmed. He didn't have a gun. He wasn't shooting anybody. But this is what you do when you're desperate. So while cross-examining Chief Arredondo, Eric Nelson subtly alluded to the threats police face, noting that they could confront dangers during even commonplace moments like traffic stops. While legal analysts think that Derek Chauvin will have a hard time arguing he feared for his life, Nelson has said the officers felt threatened by the crowd gathered around them and Floyd that day. How threatened did they feel? Once again, the reason why the crowd loud and yelling and distraught was because of what you were doing to George Floyd. If you had stopped what you were doing, the crowd would have calmed down. Quote, if the jury sees Chauvin as the defense is trying to portray him as simply doing what he was trained to do as a police officer, it would be nearly impossible for them to find that he intended to harm George Floyd, a finding necessary for a second-degree murder conviction, said Greg P. Futterman, a law professor at the University of Chicago and director of the Civil Rights and Police Accountability Project, wrote in an email. Now, what's interesting is that even when the paramedics got there, they had to ask Derek Chauvin twice to get up off of George Floyd. George Floyd had been motionless for minutes and hadn't said anything. You still kept your knee on his neck, and he's not moving. Then when the paramedics get there, it's not like Derek Chauvin jumped up off of George Floyd then and said, "Oh my God, I'm glad you're here. Here, let me take the handcuffs off. Is there anything I can do for you? I sure hope you can save his life." That's not what happened. The prosecution's testimony from high-ranking officers provides a powerful counterweight to the defense argument. All right, now, in a minute here, we'll go to the testimony from Dr. Bradford Lagenfeld, and it's the doctor who provided medical attention for George Floyd at the hospital. Okay, let's go quickly to the phone lines. Let's go to Dave, line 1. Dave, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from. Thanks for holding.
Yes, how you doing, Mike? This is Dave from Hampton Roads, Virginia. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right, man. It's been hectic. I'm all right. What about you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. You know, to this day, nobody has mentioned if the $20 bill that that George Floyd had was counterfeit or not. I guess
yeah, I haven't.
In a murder trial.
Yeah, I haven't heard definitively whether it was counterfeit or not. I haven't heard a verdict on that.
I mean, this all could be for. I mean, well, you know what? It don't even matter why. The reason that in America, it don't even matter the reason why you kill a black person. Breonna Taylor didn't do anything. Tamir Rice didn't do anything. Trayvon Martin didn't do anything. No, I mean, he could kill him for nothing. So this could all be for nothing.
Yeah. I haven't heard definitively, but also, even if it was counterfeit, there's no evidence that he knew it was counterfeit or did it intentionally. And the 19-year-old clerk, there at the Cup Foods who testified, he testified that he didn't think George Floyd knew the bill was counterfeit if it was. And also the video that was released, the surveillance video there at Cup Foods that was released for the first time in week 1 of the trial, it showed that after George Floyd bought what he was buying, he stayed in the store. So usually, from my understanding, if somebody is passing counterfeit money and they know it, they usually don't stick around in the store after they buy what they're buying. They leave. Yeah. Right. He stuck around in the store for a number of minutes, which kind of leads us to believe, at least leads me to believe that either he didn't know it was counterfeit or it was something unintentional. It does not lead me to believe that he was purposely trying to pass counterfeit money.
Exactly. You know what? That happened to me in real life. I gave a lady $100 bill, and it turned out to be counterfeit. I had gotten paid in cash from a used car dealership.
Right.
And somebody had passed some $100 bills on to the dealership, and I got paid in that money. The cashier at the grocery store just gave the money back to me, and I went right back to my job and got that straightened out.
Right. Right. Okay, Dave. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
Keep listening. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Okay, everybody. Now, I want to go to, we're going to go to clip 4 here just a second. So Dr. Bradford Lagenfeld said that George Floyd's heart had already stopped by the time he arrived at the hospital. Okay. Had already stopped by the time he arrived at the hospital. And that he believed that asphyxia or oxygen deficiency was more likely the cause of George Floyd's cardiac arrest. Okay. So very, very important testimony that came out today as well. Now, the defense has argued that George Floyd's death was caused by his drug use and pre-existing conditions such as heart disease rather than the force used on him by Derek Chauvin. But we know George Floyd was laughing and walking and joking and talking before Derek Chauvin put his knee on his neck. Okay, even though he ingested drugs and all this, he was moving and walking and talking all that stuff. You know, he was walking just fine until you put your knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Okay, let's go to clip. This is testimony from Dr. Lagenfeld, doctor who pronounced George Floyd dead, quote unquote, oxygen deficiency likely caused cardiac arrest. Let's go to this clip. Back it up. It started at the beginning. Because just back it up. Started at the beginning.
Was your leading theory then for the cause of Mr. Floyd's cardiac arrest oxygen deficiency?
That was one of the more likely possibilities. I felt that at the time, based on the information I had, it was more likely than the other possibilities.
And doctor, is there another name for death by oxygen deficiency?
Asphyxia is a commonly understood term.
Okay, so that is introducing asphyxia, which was not in the medical examiner's autopsy report. We should hear from the medical examiner, I think, this week. So that's going to be very interesting here. Now, also, jurors took copious notes when the doctor said asphyxia likely cause of George Floyd's death. Let's go to clip 4 quickly here, Shakita.
On what we've seen over the course of the morning, the medical testimony and at the beginning of the testimony from the police chief. So, Casey, first I want to start with the police chief, because obviously this was highly anticipated and very unusual that we see a police chief taking the stand for the prosecution or the defense. And so the chief took the stand today. And first, what the prosecution did is they tried to familiarize him, giving his background to the jury, talking about how he's been with the department since 1989, giving a little bit about how he's risen through the ranks, talking a little bit about policy, establishing how there's a policy for the policy, that officers need to understand what protocols are. He talked about how they spend millions of dollars on training, on use of force training. All of this is building up to this idea of worthy actions by Derek Chauvin on May 25th, a violation of those policies. And so we know from earlier today, from a motion, that the judge will allow Chief Arredondo to offer his opinion on that video where we saw Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So certainly that's one that we are watching. And then, as you mentioned earlier today, the morning started with the ER doctor that received George Floyd from the paramedics on that evening. His name was Dr. Bradford Landenfield. And basically what he testified was that he worked on George Floyd for 30 minutes. He pronounced him dead, but he also said that, look, no one said anything to me about a drug overdose or a heart attack. And of course, that's important testimony here. Then he also talked a little bit about how he believed the death was asphyxiation. Another important point here, inside the courtroom, we have two reporters that are allowed in there because of social distancing. They told us that moment, when he said asphyxiation, that's when these jurors started taking copious notes. So obviously, we're talking about some damning testimony for the defense, Casey.
Okay. All right, pause it there. All right, so those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting for a few more minutes. We'll talk about what's going on in Georgia and economic boycotts. We're out of time here on 910 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. Also, if you'd like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. If you support through Cash App, be sure to type in $, the AHN Show, and it'll come up. It'll say Michael and have my picture there. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behaviors. Not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Democracy Now! We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right, stand by. Stand by. Let me clear this call. Okay. All right, we'll go for a few more minutes. I want to squeeze in this other topic here. We'll have continuing coverage of the Derek Chauvin trial on tomorrow's show. I want to go to this next story here, and this is dealing with out of Georgia. Okay, then we'll talk a little bit about Verzuz some more. Out of Georgia, corporate America is wading into the brawl of dealing with voting rights. Corporate America is wading into the brawl dealing with voting rights. And there's more and more talk about economic boycotts as well. Okay, so I want to go to that story here in just a minute. There was a good article. Now, we've been talking about this, covering this day after day, and there was a good article from the NBC News that is giving an update on what's taking place in Georgia. All right. The sudden groundswell comes as Republicans seek to tighten voting laws across the country. This is an article from April 3rd, 2021. Okay. So this was Saturday. And we were off on Easter Sunday. So this is the first I've had to talk about this. I'm going to go to this clip here in just a minute of Bishop Reginald Jackson, who's calling for economic boycott, in Georgia as well, of certain corporations that are not speaking out against these voter restriction bills. Now, also, we know that on April 2nd, okay, Friday, April 2nd, we know that Major League Baseball announced that the All-Star game, which was scheduled for July 13th, the All-Star game is not going to take place in Atlanta, okay, behind this voter restriction bill. All right, so if we look at let me pull this up here from NBC News, just a second. And we also Governor Brian Kemp has doubled down on the on Senate Bill 202 that he signed into law. He is condemning Major League Baseball for moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta. And you have Republicans engaging in council culture that they have been protesting about or complaining about also, which is very interesting. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at this article here from NBC News. Okay, so voting rights advocate Isley has been fighting for a week like this all year. For months, more than half a dozen activist groups, including her own New Georgia project, had urged business interests to denounce Republican-led efforts to restrict voting access in Georgia, she said. Now, billboards had gone up across the state that parodied corporate slogans urging action. Advocates projected campaigns on the side of hotel hosting attendees for the NBA All-Star weekend in early March. Now, the companies had offered cautious statements, and Isley calls hand-wringing and shoulder shrugging. That is until Wednesday, okay, when all of this changed. So that was Wednesday, March 31st, okay? That was Wednesday, March 31st when all of this changed. Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola issued forceful condemnations of Georgia's new voter restrictive laws or law enacted last week, okay, on March 25th. Thursday, March 25th, it was signed into law by Governor Brian Kemp. Now, from there, corporate criticism of Republican voting bills seemed to spread like wildfire, moving across state lines and morphing into a national trend that activists say finally reflects the urgency of the sheer number of restrictions under consideration across the U.S. All right. I'm going to go to this clip here from the readout with Joanne Reed in just a second. This is from April 2nd, and this deals with Major League Baseball moving the All-Star game. Okay. We'll go to that clip in just a second here. Let me cue that one up. Now, from there, corporate criticism of Republican voting bills spread like wildfire, moving across state lines and morphing into a national trend that activists say finally reflects the urgency of the sheer number of restrictions under consideration across these. Isley said there's a clarity about January 6th that people get, that was an attack on our democracy, that was an attack on our democracy. All right, let me pause that clip. Now, if you understand that the attack on the Electoral College vote was unpatriotic and anti-democratic, then you need to continue down that same logical street until you get to these 360 plus bills in 47 states that are trying to make it more difficult for Americans to vote. So major corporations foray into the election policy debate, which experts called unusual, comes as Republicans across the country work to advance hundreds of restrictions, changes that voting rights advocates and civil rights groups argue would disproportionately affect voters of color. Now, by March 24th, 2021, lawmakers had introduced 361 restrictive election bills in 47 state legislatures. By March 24th, 361 restrictive election bills in 47 state legislatures, according to the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice at New York University, which has been tracking the legislation. Now, that is 108 more bills than in the center's last count on February 19th, a 43% increase. All right, now I want to go to this clip here. This is from the readout on MSNBC, Joanne Reed. This is dealing with Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball pulls All-Star game from Atlanta in protest of restrictive new law, restrictive new voting law. Okay, let's go to this clip here.
Major League Baseball announced today that they will no longer hold this year's All-Star game and baseball draft in Atlanta, Georgia. In a brief statement, the commissioner of baseball explained that Major League Baseball fundamentally supports voting rights for all Americans and opposes restrictions to the ballot box. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, a guy yearning for Trump's warm embrace, called the move a knee-jerk decision in response to woke cancel culture. Oh, Brian. That's a real cute catchphrase, but I'm pretty sure you just did the exact same thing with the legislation that you just signed, which, let's be honest, is a knee-jerk reaction to your party losing. And now, instead of reevaluating your message, you're just canceling out thousands of voters. Stay classy, Brian. Kemp's likely 2022 challenger, Stacey Abrams, issued her own statement, writing, like many Georgians, I'm disappointed that the MLB is relocating the All-Star game. However, I commend the players, owners, and league commissioner for speaking out. I urge others in positions of leadership to do so as well. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms reprimanded Republicans for causing the backlash, tweeting, just as elections have consequences, so do the actions of those who are elected. Unfortunately, restricting voting access is a trend that is being repeated in legislatures across the country. Overnight, Republicans in the Texas State Senate passed legislation that would impose additional restrictions on voting, including reducing early voting hours, prohibiting drive-through voting, and allowing activist poll watchers to film voters getting assistance, which sounds a lot like voter intimidation. Just as in Georgia, the Texas restrictions just happen to target predominantly diverse and largely Democratic counties. Quite the coincidence. Texas-based corporations like American Airlines, Dell Technologies, and Microsoft aren't making the same mistake that Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines did by being slow on the uptake. They were out quickly with statements publicly opposing the bill. Joining me now is Tiffany Cross, host of The Cross Connection on MSNBC, and Jason Johnson, professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, one of our favorite duos on the television. Tiffany, I got to start with you. I am struck not only by Major League Baseball's, pretty strong statement here being like, we're yanking the game, but also the corporate reaction that was so quick in Texas. You didn't have American Airlines waiting around for people to talk boycott. They were like, we oppose the bill in advance.
Right. But that didn't happen on its own. You know, like I refuse to think that corporate America just has this heavy heart and is so concerned about voter suppression. That is the work of activists. That's the work of folks like LaTosha Brown and Black Voters Matter. That is the influence of activists in Georgia that cast a wide net of influence from Georgia to Texas and all across the Bible Belt and all up through the Midwest, because this type of voter suppression is not just limited to the southern states. It's happening everywhere since they struck down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. So I applaud the people out there who are taking it to the streets. But the bottom line is here, Joy, you just laid out very well in your open the massive voter suppression effort happening. The federal elections at this point, or the election process, needs to be federally regulated. This is why it's so important for us to focus on H.R. 1, which would federalize and regulate the election process all across the country. As long as we have people who are laser focused on attacking Black voters, who saved this democracy, quite frankly, we need to be focused on saving Black voters. And I think as long as we leave that up to Republican-controlled state legislatures, we'll continue to see this type of draconian and egregious action taken against us.
Okay. All right. So that was from that's from the readout from April 2nd. 2021, MLB puts All-Star game from Atlanta in protest of restrictive new voting law. So also mentioned in that segment is what's going on in Texas. Now, I've posted some articles dealing with this. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. Well, we talked about Texas a little bit, but the Texas GOP pushes restrictive voting reform bill that reduces early voting hours, prohibits drive-through voting, bans election officials from proactively sending vote by mail applications, lets poll watchers video record voters receiving assistance, okay, which could make some people voting nervous, not because they're doing anything wrong, but just who the hell is this person recording me asking questions? Okay. So check that out from the readout. If we look quickly here at this article from NBC News, this talks about what's going on in Texas. This is from April 1st, 2021 by Jane C. Timm, Timm. Texas Senate passes bill to cut early voting, empower poll watchers. Now, most of these poll watchers in Texas are going to be white. Okay. Texas Senate passes bill to cut early voting, empower poll watchers. The state legislature leads the nation with 49 restrictive voting bills introduced. 49 restrictive voting bills introduced. Okay. Now, if the African American vote didn't matter and Hispanic vote didn't matter, if all this stuff didn't matter, why are Republicans working so hard to nullify our vote? Why are they working so hard to make it harder for African Americans to vote? Why is this? Now, the Texas Senate in the early morning hours Thursday. Okay. Now, this article is from April 1st. From Thursday, April 1st. So they're talking about early Thursday, April 1st, 2021. The Texas Senate in the early morning hours, Thursday, April 1st, 2021, passed a sweeping election bill that cuts early voting options and empowers partisan poll watchers. Senate Bill number 7 is what it's called. Senate Bill number 7 bans overnight early voting and drive-through early voting, popular options offered by Harris County, Texas during the 2020 election. Republican lawmakers championed the bill as a measure that would make Texas elections more secure. But there wasn't a problem with the security of your elections. This is based upon the big lie that was being pushed. Okay. And then you have 361 voter restriction bills that are trying to be pushed through state legislatures, operating based upon the big lie and the stolen election, which is a lie. But advocates argued the state was trying to make voting harder, particularly for communities of color, disabled voters, and older voters. The bill now heads to the Texas House of Representatives, which also considered its own omnibus package of restrictions, House Bill 6, on Thursday. Okay, last week Thursday, House Bill 6. The Texas legislature leads the nation in restrictive voting bills, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. 49 bills have been introduced that would limit access to the ballot box. Okay, so read the rest of this article here. You're going to hear more about this from NBC News. Read the rest of this article. Texas Senate passed bill to cut early voting, empower poll watchers. All right, now I want to go to this interview here with Bishop Reginald Jackson of the 6th Episcopal District of the AME Church. You've heard me talk about Bishop Reginald Jackson before, and this ties into the other article from NBC News that I was talking about. Corporate America is wading into voting rights brawl. Corporate America is wading into voting rights brawl because Bishop Reginald Jackson and others are calling for an economic boycott of certain Georgia corporations that is supposed to start on Wednesday, April 7th. Okay, so I want to go to this clip from American Voices on MSNBC from April 3rd. This is from Saturday, April 3rd. Okay, Georgia church leader ramps up pressure on businesses to oppose voting restrictions. Let's go to this clip.
He oversees all AME churches in Georgia. Joining us now, Bishop Reginald Jackson. He oversees all AME churches in Georgia, and he is leading the movement to hold companies responsible. It is good to see you, Bishop. I want to start with Major League Baseball pulling its All-Star game out of Atlanta. What do you think of the move, and how did advocacy on the ground make this possible?
Well, I commend Major League Baseball for acting with conscience and for deciding that what Georgia did not meet its value. And so as much as the governor may complain and gripe, Major League Baseball did not make its decision based on a lie. It made its decision based on truth. We advise the governor to go and do likewise.
Governor Kemp said today the new law is actually about expanding ballot access and securing the vote. I personally failed to see how it does either. How about you, Bishop?
Well, you know, Governor Kemp is living in denial, and I have a definition for denial. Don't even know I am lying. There is no way that this law passed in Georgia expands opportunities to vote. Its specific intention is to suppress and make it harder for people to vote. Look at the specifics of the bill, and it speaks for itself. For example, on the ballot drop boxes, Governor Kemp, when he voted last year, went after 5 o'clock to a ballot drop box, which was outside. Under this law, which he signed, those boxes will be inside, and those businesses closed. That means you will not be able to vote. In addition to that, it limits the number of drop boxes. In most counties, there will only be one ballot drop box. In Fulton County, the largest city geographically and voter-wise in Georgia, will only be allowed to have 5 drop boxes, which means people, especially seniors who do not drive, will have to find some public transportation to be able to cast their ballot. That is suppressive and offensive.
Bishop, you've called for boycotts of Georgia businesses that don't come out strongly against this new elections law. When we talked just a week ago, we were talking about Coca-Cola. There are a lot of organizers who felt that Coca-Cola and Delta's more pointed recent criticism, while welcome, came a little too late. So I wonder, how do you continue to push to hold these companies responsible?
Well, it's my hope to have a conversation with Delta, Coca-Cola, and some other companies on either Monday or Tuesday. And if we can get them to agree to do 4 things, one, Delta and Coca-Cola both have already publicly come out in opposition to the bill. It's late, but at least they did come out. But we want corporations across the country to come out collectively, speak out against these other bills. For example, in Arizona, Texas, and Michigan, all of these states that come out in opposition to these bills. We also want them to come out in favor of SR1 and SR4, and we want them to support the litigation we have against this legislation. If we can do that, we can make progress, and I think if they're corporately responsible, they won't have a problem doing it.
Stacey Abrams talked this week about the lessons from past boycotts and the pain they must bring, and they must be shared to be sustainable. Take a listen.
I understand the passion of those calling for boycotts of Georgia following the passage of SB 202. Boycotts have been an important tool throughout our history to achieve social change. But here's the thing. Black, Latino, AAPI, and Native American voters whose votes are the most suppressed under SB 202 are also the most likely to be hurt by potential boycotts of Georgia. To our friends across the country, please do not boycott us. And to my fellow Georgians, stay and fight. Stay and vote.
What do you say to advocates who think boycotts are not the right move just yet?
Well, Stacey Abrams and I talked yesterday and 2 days ago, and really we're on the same page. We made this boycott effective on April the 7th. One of the reasons we made it April the 7th was to give these corporations time to come around. It's my hope that by Wednesday, they in fact will come around. Delta and Coca-Cola have already begun that process. Again, we cannot support people with our dollars who do not support us in our efforts to be able to exercise our right to vote. This boycott is not anything we want to do. The only way we will boycott if it's something we have to do. And if we have to do it, we'll do it. But I'm confident that Coca-Cola, Delta, and some of these other companies are going to see the light and come on board.
In an act of retaliation against Delta, the Georgia House of Representatives voted to revoke a yearly $35 million tax credit for the airline. The bill didn't move forward in the state Senate. What's your message to corporations who see that happening and see possible economic backlash from GOP lawmakers?
Well, to be frank with you, I think that's why Coca-Cola and Delta didn't speak out before. In 2018, this legislature sought to do the same thing. It's a way of threatening corporations to say, if you speak out against what we're trying to do, we're going to punish you. I want these corporations to know if they do the right thing, you will have the people standing behind them. And I also believe you're going to see the faith community begin to apply a lot of pressure to our state legislators. There is no way we're going to sit by and let them blackmail and exercise vengeance against corporations because they do the right thing. The fact is, there's no right way to do wrong.
You know as well as anyone that there are many ways in which to change or tinker with the playing field when it comes to our democracy. In addition to this voting rights legislation, you also have the Georgia state lawmakers returning later this year for a special session on redistricting. I wonder, what are you going to be watching for as that process unfolds?
But during their time off, I'm going to be lobbying some of these legislators. Again, nothing changes without pressure. And again, we're going to get them to at least come to the point of understanding you can't reward a lie by passing legislation which is suppressive. And so during this time off, as we prepare to come back, there's some who want them to reconsider this legislation. All I know is we're going to be having a frank, candid discussion with our legislators so that they can move Georgia in the right direction. Let me make it very clear. The governor and these legislators have nobody but themselves to blame for the position that they had put Georgia in. Governor Kemp said the other day to talk about a boycott in the midst of a pandemic is absolutely ridiculous. No, what's ridiculous is to try to pass legislation that is based on a lie. We want the governor to open his eyes, open his ears, and do the right thing.
Bishop, I want to loop back to something you said at the beginning of our interview, which is that this isn't just about Georgia. Republicans have introduced restrictive voting bills in 46 other states. A little bit later, we're going to be talking with two advocates and organizers in Texas. What is your message to them? What is your message to leaders across the country who are contending with legislation like this in their own states? What are the lessons that they can watch and learn from Georgia?
You know, Alicia, the fact of the matter is, I hope the corporate community understands that we have a golden opportunity to turn what is a problem into an opportunity. If our corporate community exercise corporate responsibility, we'll be able to move this country back to the point where, in fact, we really deal with issues of justice and freedom and equality for everybody. And that's up to the corporate community. We're going to try to push them to do that. And I think it's important if you can get the faith community, the corporate community together. Historically, the Black church has been the conscience of the nation. It's important for us to be the conscience now. And again, let me say to my Republican colleagues, we face a dilemma in this country where our democracy is on the line. We no longer have two parties in this country. Today, we have the Democrats and a cult. And so Republicans need to decide, are they going to be a party, or are they going to be a cult, which is led by somebody who has no integrity, no character, and no morality? That's a decision Republicans are going to have to make. Hopefully, we can help them make the right decision.
All right, that's Bishop Reginald Jackson. I like Bishop Jackson. Okay. I never met him before. Don't know that much about him. I like Bishop Jackson. Okay, I've seen a few interviews with him. I've read some articles where he's quoted. So he said you have two parties. You have the Democratic Party and you have a cult. All right, so check out, this is a good interview Alicia Menendez did for American Voices. This is from MSNBC, and this was on April 2nd. April 3rd. This was Saturday, April 3rd. Georgia church leader ramps up pressure on businesses to oppose voting restrictions. Voting restrictions. All right, we'll post a link here for that article now, for that clip. Now, there was an article. See, we were because of Easter Sunday, the radio station was shut down. They were just rebroadcasting shows. So some of this content we would have talked about Sunday, but yeah, and that would have been after Verzuz, because Verzuz started 8 p.m. Well, no, that would have been during Verzuz. Hell, I wouldn't have been on either. So I would have had to set up something to record it. I'd have to watch the first hour of it and jump on the air at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There was an article from Washington Post, another big development in this whole fight to put pressure on corporations, to put pressure on these state legislatures and stop these draconian bills. Friday, April 2nd. Now, all this is taking place. All of this is taking place during the 56th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, okay, March 7th, 1965. And also the 56th anniversary of the beginning of the 56th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March, which started March 21st, 1965. And we just know that we commemorated the assassination of Dr. King, April 4th, 1968. All this is happening at the same time, right? So if we look at this this big development that took place on Friday, April 2nd, this article from the Washington Post, HP, Hewlett-Packard, Dow, Under Armour, among nearly 200 companies speaking out against voting law changes in Texas and other states. Okay, among nearly 200 companies speaking out against voting law changes in Texas, other states. After Georgia voting rights activists called for corporate pushback against proposed voting bills in Texas and dozens of other states. Okay, this is huge. Now, last week we talked about how we talked about the letter from 72 African American executives. Okay, that 72 African American executives putting pressure on denouncing these voter restriction bills and putting pressure on corporations, to speak out. Okay, that was on Wednesday, March 31st, that came out. There's a big article from the New York Times about that as well. I'm trying to pull that up. I think we have that article here already pulled up. Let's see. But I'll find it. Yeah, you're right here. Yeah. Let's flip over to this one right here. We talked about this last week, last Wednesday show, I think it was. This was a huge development. This is leveraging your position in corporate America to push an agenda. Okay. Black executives call on corporations to fight restrictive voting laws. Dozens responded after companies in Georgia said little against state legislation that put strict rules in place. So Wednesday, March 31st was a turning point. And this initiative with the 72 African-American executives is being led by Ken Chenault, okay, on the left and on my left, and Kenneth Frazier. Ken Chenault is the former CEO of American Express. He was the CEO of American Express for years. And then Kenneth Frazier is the CEO of Merck Pharmaceuticals, all right? So they led this initiative. So you have this big development here. This was reported by New York Times. Other outlets picked up on it. Okay, and then I want to go back over to the article from the Washington Post here. Hold on, where's the article from the Post? Okay, right here. Dealing with the 200 corporations. Okay, so nearly 200 companies on Friday joined in a strong statement against proposals that threaten to restrict voting access in dozens of states, in a further sign of corporate willingness to speak out on social justice issues, as Major League Baseball announced that it would be moving this year's summer All-Star game out of Atlanta in response to the passage of Georgia's voter restrictive voting law. Executives from at least 193 companies, including Dow Chemicals, Hewlett Packard, Twitter, Estee Lauder, and others, urged the protection of voting rights access across the country. Okay, so this is a huge development. This is what happens when you keep the pressure up. And I've said before, we have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics, to enforce our political agenda. You have to have a political agenda before you can enforce one, by the way. Now, there are hundreds of bills threatening to make voting more difficult in dozens of states nationwide, executives wrote in the statement, which also included signatures from the CEO of Under Armour, Salesforce, and Viacom CBS. Now, see, this type of pressure and these bold statements that corporations are now making after the Georgia bill was signed, okay, this is the type of tone that they were taking in 2015 and 2016 with the transgender bathroom bills. They came out with force. There was forceful denunciation, forceful repudiation of those bills. And they were threatening to cancel conferences taking place in the respective states, and stopping projects taking place in the respective states, things like this. Oftentimes there was some type of economic withdrawal threat Okay, there was some type of economic withdrawal threat that was backing up their bold statements against the transgender bathroom bills. Now we're starting to see corporate America speak boldly against these voter restriction bills. Quote, we call on elected leaders in every state capital and in Congress to work across the aisle and ensure that every eligible American has the freedom to easily cast their ballot, and particularly fully in our democracy, the statement said. Okay. Now, the joint statement was organized by Civic Alliance, a nonpartisan group of businesses focused on voter engagement following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the summer's protests against policing. Companies made commitments to fight systemic racism, including within their own ranks. All right. Now, this raised the bar for expectations among consumers and activists for corporate accountability, building pressure to speak up about public policy and its effect on communities. Now, after Georgia signed into law its Election Integrity Act, which critics say disproportionately affects voting access for people of color, corporations this week came under pressure, which would be last week, because this article is from April 2nd. Okay, so this article is from Friday, April 2nd. So that week ending Friday, April 2nd, corporations came under pressure to speak out before similar bills introduced in nearly every state across the country are passed. So the pressure increased on these corporations to speak out against these bills in other states, because there's 47 states now that were 46 in addition to Georgia, 46 states in addition to Georgia. So these corporations have the ability to stop these bills because they donate to these Republicans in these state legislatures that are writing the bills. They have the power to stop this. All right, so read the rest of this article here from the Washington Post. HP, Dow, Under Armour, among nearly 200 companies speaking out against voting law changes in Texas, other states. All right. So this is huge. This is a huge development, but this is what pressure does. When you keep the pressure up, pressure can burst pipes. This is what happens. Now, the next step, after we get all this solved with these voter restriction bills and stop that, the next step is to then go to these same corporations that are making commitments to African Americans and making commitments to voting rights, things like this. Go to these corporations and renegotiate our relationship with corporate America, is one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, says we have to do. Renegotiate our relationship with corporate America and get more contracts and more business from these corporations with African American owned businesses. More contracts regarding advertising agencies. Who are your advertising agencies that you use? How many advertising agencies do you use that are African American owned advertising agencies? What percentage of your advertising budget is spent with African American owned advertising agencies? Okay. Well, what percentage of your annual revenue comes from the African American community? We need to increase the amount of money these corporations spend with African American owned advertising agencies, the amount of money that they deposit into African American owned banks, okay, which then gives more money that African American owned banks can loan to us to start businesses, buy homes, go to college, what have you, okay? What percentage of your contracts that you give out, catering contracts, limousine contracts, janitorial service contracts, et cetera, what percentage of your contracts each year go to African Americans, not minorities, not people of color, but specifically African Americans? If you don't know, why don't you know? This is how we have to go to each one of these corporations and renegotiate our relationship with corporate America. Because when we do that, when you have more money going to African American owned advertising agencies, and then also what percentage of your marketing dollars do you spend in African-American owned media, not African-American targeted media, because that's usually companies owned by white people. African-American owned media, whether it's TV One, whether it's Roland Martin Unfiltered, whether it's the Griot, Byron Allen, okay? Because when African-American owned media gets a bigger chunk of corporate dollars, it allows them to grow, allows them to scale upwards, allows them to hire more people, it allows them to do a lot more things. This is dealing with renegotiating our relationship with corporate America, renegotiating our relationship from one of just being largely a consumer, dollars flowing out of our pockets into theirs, and having money come back to the African-American community, come back to our businesses, contracts, things like this. That's renegotiating our relationship with corporate America. That's the next, after we get all this solved with the voter restriction bills, that's the next step. All these corporations that came out in support of us, et cetera, that we had to stick our foot in their behinds and put pressure on them. We go to each one of those corporations, renegotiate our relationship with corporate America as well. And see, and you all saw, a lot of you all heard about Roland Martin and Byron Allen and Ice Cube putting pressure on General Motors to increase the amount of money General Motors is spending with African-American media for advertising, things like this. These are things that we have to do. Okay. So lastly, early in the show, we talked about Verzuz, Earth, Wind, and Fire versus the Isley brothers as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you'd like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. There was a good article from, I saw a good article from Essence, okay, Essence Magazine, and it dealt with the Verzuz battle that took place, and everybody watched it. And you know, they had it on a good day because it was on Easter Sunday, so a lot of people were home, or you know, maybe they were over at their relatives or something. Hope they were wearing masks and everything. Hope they were socially distancing. But they picked a good day for it, and that I think helped also to the huge viewership that they had as well. Of course, you know, it's the Isley brothers and Earth, Wind, and Fire, so you're going to have viewership. But this helped. The fact that it was on a holiday like this helped also. All right. So there's a good article. Well, I watched a lot of it, and a lot of these songs brought back memories. Some of the songs I forgot about, like Philip Bailey. Okay, Philip Bailey towards the end sung "Easy Lover." So "Easy Lover," that's from like 1984, 1985. That's a duet he did with Phil Collins. All right. And I had totally forgotten about that song, "Easy Lover." But he sang "Easy Lover." You know, I forgot about the song "Busted" by the Isley brothers. I think I still have it on CD. They did "Busted." I remember "Contagious." Okay, "You're contagious, touch me, baby, give me what you got." That was a song they did with Shantae Moore. All right. I wish they had Shantae Moore on there yesterday, because I definitely wanted to see her. But I mean, you know, this is crazy. I mean, it was fantastic what they did. Now, I wonder if they're going to do something like this on TV. Because can you imagine watching Verzuz on TV? You don't have to do it on Instagram. You can actually watch it on TV, cable, or something like that. It probably wouldn't be broadcast. Well, it may be broadcast television. I don't know, because they have the Grammys, and you know, you get into royalties and things like this. But they have the Grammys and they're performing songs there. But I mean, if this was something on broadcast television, CBS, ABC, NBC, I think this would be huge. But for now, it's on Instagram. So they both of them perform classic hits, you know, whether it was September or Summer Breeze. And like I said earlier in the show, I can't get the song Summer Breeze out of my mind, out of my head. You know, I'm hearing it play all day. But this article here from Essence. Let's look at this quickly here from Essence. It talks about 9 moments we love from Earth, Wind, and Fire versus the Isley brothers. Okay, 9 moments we loved from Earth, Wind, and Fire versus the Isley brothers. You know, these are some outfits from the 70s. You can see that, right? And I wonder if I want that's Philip Bailey right there in the pink. Maurice White, who passed away. But let's see, let's close this out. Steve Harvey was the guest host. Steve Harvey was the MC. He was the host. Now, some people were complaining about the story Steve Harvey was telling. I like the stories. I'm a historian. I tell stories. I like the stories because the stories that Steve Harvey was telling also tied into the impact that music has on people and how music impacts people's lives. But the stories he was talking about dealt with a lot of history as well. So, you know, I like hearing stories like that. I thought it was you know, a really good touch to add that in as well. Now, the virtual competition series was created to celebrate legends, and founders Swiss Beats and Timbaland reinforced that vision by tapping the musical giants to face off. Okay. So they list 9 moments. You can check out the rest of these. Ron Isley's runs, Mr. Biggs and his cane sparkled when performing select singles from the 28 platinum albums he shares with his brother Ernie Isley. 28 platinum albums, man. Come on. 28 platinum albums. There's a lot of artists out right now that think they're like the biggest thing since sliced bread. They're not gonna have 2 platinum albums. So everybody was talking about Ron Isley and his beard, okay? And I think Ron Isley is gonna end up with like a endorsement for a beard for some beard trimmers or something, for like some beard grooming trimmers or a grooming kit. And I think also he's gonna have an endorsement deal for a line of canes like he was carrying. I think he's gonna have an endorsement deal for a line of canes also, because he was looking sharp. Let me see. I took a lot of screenshots. We're gonna try to pull some of those up here. See if I can get some of those up. I posted them here on Facebook, a bunch of them. So we'll try to pull some of those up also. But I want to see the verses I want to see is Kool and the Gang and Kool and the Gang and Cameo. I think that'll be a good verses. Kool and the Gang and Cameo. Okay. Let me see if I can flip over to my Facebook page and let's look at this one here. This is one I took. I took a bunch of them. I have to go through and crop some of them, but this is one that I took. The performing towards the end. I mean, he was looking sharp. Now, he reminded me, you remember the episode of Sanford and Son when they had Fast Fanny and and they had the party after Junior Cooper's funeral, and Fred had his Superfly suit on, right? That's what Ron Isley remind me of. He reminded me of Fred Sanford with his Superfly suit on. Let's see. Can we zoom in on this? How we do this? Okay. And then we'll save this picture also. We'll try to save that and bring that up another way. But it was a good night for like real music, not all this sampling stuff. You know, not all this music with explicit lyrics and all this cursing and everything. But it was a good night for like real music. Okay. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I think there's going to be a lot of babies born 9 months from now also. I think there's going to be a lot of babies born 9 months from now as well. But so they talked about Ron Isley and his cane and things like this. Mutual love and respect is number 2. Each group sprouted love for their opponents and their bandmates throughout the evening. Black men openly loving on one another. We love to see that. Okay. Now here's a picture of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Let's flip back over to the article. And I'm gonna have to pull out. I have Earth, Wind, and Fire's greatest hits on CD. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull that out and pull out the Isley Brothers' Contagious. I have that on CD also. Earth, Wind, and Fire performing the national cookout anthems. Okay, now these are not pictures from the actual verses. These are some other pictures. But I took pictures. I took screenshot verses, so I have some of those. I have to go through and crop some of them. Let's see if we can pull up another one here. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is one. So I posted on Facebook. I said I want to be a cool old man in like 20 years, like Ron Isley. Okay. Let's see here. All right. So we have this one here, Earth, Wind, and Fire performing the national cookout anthems, Reasons. Okay, they perform Reasons. Then we have number 4, Ernie Isley's guitar. Okay, Ernie was playing that guitar. And seeing them, it makes me want to play the saxophone again. I used to play saxophone in 5th and 6th grade. Then I gave it up. It makes me want to play the saxophone again, learn to play the saxophone again. So the Isley Brothers showed off their skills that inspired countless samples during several cuts, including Harvest to the World. I mean, the Isley Brothers has so many hits. The Twist and Shout came out in about 1959. Twist and Shout, 1959. Okay, so they talk about the production glow up. We enjoy seeing celebrities melt down and cover one another while trying to navigate technical difficulties. But something about seeing Verzuz take their presentation to the next level made us swell with pride. Okay. Steve Harvey. Now, I think Steve Harvey did a good job. I like the stories. The media mogul showed up sharp as a tack in his lavender suit, two-tone fur, and wide brim white hat. Okay. Now I stay sharp at business suits. I don't have no fur coat. Don't plan to buy one. Okay. And I ain't into killing animals for a damn coat. I don't do that. I wear like business suits. I don't have like other types of suits. But anyway, he did look sharp. Learning the story behind at your best, you are loved. The Isley Brothers performed a lyrical love letter that became an Aaliyah hit with their signature suaveness before Ernie Isley shared the motivation behind their writing choices. Quote, we were always trying when it came to our love songs to deliberately compliment a woman, And see, once again, all the stories behind the songs, the stories that Steve Harvey told, that took this to another level besides just music or one band versus another band. You're learning some history at the same time. So I like it when you have stories from musicians, stories from people like Steve Harvey also. And when you talk to artists, and see, this gets into earlier today, I reran the March 15th show, which was the day after the Grammys. And I talked about talked about Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B performing WAP at the Grammys. And I encourage people to talked to songwriters, because I have, we really need to look at songs, especially music videos. And my background's in marketing. My degree in business administration with a major in marketing, so I probably have a deeper understanding about this than the average person, because I was trained in advertising, marketing, different things like this. We really need to look at songs, especially music videos, as mini commercials. M-I-N-I, mini commercials, 3, 4, 5-minute commercials. Because when you talk to songwriters, they're talking about the inspiration of the song, and they're talking about the message that they're trying to convey in the song. They're trying to get you to feel something, get you to start doing something, stop doing something, what have you. There's messages in the songs that songwriters put into the songs. So to think that this is just music and it doesn't mean anything, that's not what the songwriter says. To think that this is just words over music, and we know that you remember ideas and words better when it's set to music. When you talk to the songwriters, they talk about the messages that are in the music. So we need to look at the music, especially music videos, because when you engage more senses, SENSES, when you engage more senses, audio and visual, it leaves more of an impression on the mind and the subconscious. We need to look at the music, especially music videos, as 3, 4, 5-minute commercials. So then you ask the question, well, what is it that they are marketing? What is it that they're selling? All right. So let's go back to this one here. So D Nice's love song medleys. D Nice did a really, really good job of DJing also. The DJ behind this year's quarantine baby boom spun a mini set of sexy jams from both groups at Steve Harvey's request. The salute to old school baby making music was so smooth that Harvey leapt out of his seat to serve Carrero during Earth, Wind, and Fire's Would You Mind? A lot of y'all was conceived on that, he quipped, right? The surprise group finale. Earth, Wind, and Fire joined the Isley brothers for a duet of the legendary For the Love of You, Part 1 and 2. They even let Steve Harvey sing a few bars in between stretches of pouring out a little liquor, right? So that was I'm gonna go back and see if I could watch that again. That was a hell of a Verzuz. Earth, Wind, and Fire versus the Isley brothers. Now, many people are saying the Isley brothers won. Okay, I think they did also. I like both groups, but I think the Isley brothers took it away. Okay. But regardless of which group you like, I think I didn't see any Facebook posts or any social media posts or anything like that from people, from anybody who said they didn't like it at all. Okay, I didn't see anything like that, right? So I'm looking forward to the next one. I know they already have the next one scheduled. I want to see Kool in the Game versus Cameo. Okay, so I need to call somebody. I need to contact somebody. That's what I want to see. Kool in the Game versus Cameo. I also want to see Apollonia 6 versus the Mary Jane Girls. I want to see that as well. Apollonia 6 versus the Mary Jane Girls. I have to think of some more verses that I want to see. Also, I want to see like some real groups. Okay, you know, the Temptations and the Four Tops. That'll be good. Okay, whoever the Four Tops have with them. I think Duke is still with the Four Tops. But you know, some classic groups. You know, a good versus would be Smokey Robinson versus Stevie Wonder. That'd be a good versus right there. Two master songwriters. Okay, two master songwriters. Smokey Robinson has written over 1,000 songs. All right, two master songwriters. Smokey Robinson versus Stevie Wonder. That'd be a hell of a versus. All right. Well, hey, look, if you like this type of information, also you can support the African History Network. $ the AHN show through Cash App. $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal. PayPal.me/the AHN show. PayPal.me/the AHN show. Or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We're here 6 nights a week. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc. When you do it through Cash App, be sure to type in $ the AHN show, SHOW. $ the AHN show, SHOW through Cash App. And it'll say Michael and then have my picture there. You can still register for the online course that I teach also, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Ancient Kemet, Kemet, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 8-week, but this time around it's going to be 9 weeks. It's a 9-week, 18-hour online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place as well. Okay, so I teach the class on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, everything. All right, and we just finished dealing with some of the history of the Moors in Europe, the African Moors in Europe, to take the teachings of ancient Kemet, of ancient Egypt, out of Africa into Europe. And these teachings bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. I do the classes live, okay? And all the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. So you can ask questions during the live class through the live text chat. And you can, all the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch them, over and over again. You can watch them around the world. So as soon as you register, you can watch last week's class. All right. And a few weeks ago, our guest speaker in the class was Dr. David M. Hotep, author of the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Okay. Dr. David M. Hotep, who wrote this book. And we talked about the African presence in the Americas going back thousands of years ago, and his new book, which should be out any day now. And then also our guest speaker the week before that was cultural anthropologist Sister Nubia Wardford. Sister Nubia Wardford, who's a cultural anthropologist. We dealt with the origins of ancient Kush and African queens of antiquity. Okay. All right. Eric says a good versus would be SWV versus Envo. Yeah, that'd be good. SWV versus Envo. No. SWV is aren't they supposed to go up against Escape? I want to see that too, because I like both groups. They have some fine women in those groups too. I want to see SWV versus Escape, but I like to see SWV versus Envo as well. And yeah, that'll be a good one. Or they may do Salt and Pepper versus Envo, even though those are two different styles, but they did do What a Man together. Those are two different styles. You got hip hop and R&B, but yeah, and you're going to have to get Total. You're going to bring Total back. You're going to bring Total back. Also, Total. I used to like Total. Total's going to have to do it. Maybe Brownstone. Maybe you could do Brownstone versus Total. Okay, remember Brownstone, 5 Miles to Empty. Maybe you could do Total versus Brownstone, and SWV is supposed to go up against Escape. That's going to be really good. It's going to be a lot of babies can see that. And they're going to have to do Downtown. I'm going to tell you that. SWV is going to have to do Downtown. All right, I'm just serious. Okay, that's a classic right there. Downtown. I like, so Now there's going to be a Verzuz with New Edition, but who the hell gonna want to go up against New Edition? I don't know, because they have a lot of hits. New Edition has a lot of hits, man, and then they could do the hits from LSG. They could do the hits from BBD. They could do Johnny Gill's hits. I don't know, but New Edition. I like to see a Verzuz with New Edition and some other group. I don't know who would have. Oh, you know what? Okay, this may sound crazy, but at one point I think they had the same manager. I think it was Maurice Starr. How about New Edition versus New Kids on the Block? New Edition versus New Kids on the Block, right? Then, I mean, that is I think you probably get 500,000 people watching that. New Edition versus New Kids on the Block. Boys to Men. Now, I don't know who's going to win. Oh, how about Boys to Men versus Jodeci, right? Because there was some rivalry back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, whatever, when they were out. There was some rivalry between Boys to Men and Jodeci. But Boys to Men versus Jodeci would be a good one. Okay, that'd be a good one. But New Edition and New Kids on the Block. Okay, that would that all the women used to go to the New Edition concerts, all that stuff. They're now like 40 years old, what have you, still trying to Maybe I shouldn't say they're still trying to fit into the same dresses they were wearing back then, but anyway. But New Edition versus New Kids on the Block. But Boys to Men versus Jodeci, that'll be a good one, right? Boys to Men versus Jodeci. Now, I like to see Keith Sweat. Did Keith Sweat go up against somebody? I like to see Keith Sweat go up against somebody, but also, you gotta get the some more male R&B groups like Silk. Silk versus somebody. I'm not sure who Silk will go up against. But I want to see SWV and Escape. That's going to be a hell of a concert right there. All right. So, all right. Well, look, we have to get out of here. Yeah, you can still register for the online course I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. We teach that on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then I do the show here at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, we're going to get out of here. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, and Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. Turn on live notifications so you know when we go live as well. We're going to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. Okay, Keith Sweat and Maxwell. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Keith Sweat. So then you have to do one with you had to do D'Angelo. What about Maxwell versus D'Angelo? Okay, because Maxwell is like neo soul, and so is D'Angelo. Keith Sweat and Maxwell kind of like two different genres. Keith Sweat came out in like '88 when I was still in high school. All right. I mean, our what was our theme for our prom? Make It Last Forever. That's from Keith Sweat, like 1989. So those two different generations. One, and kind of two different genres. Even though it was R&B, Maxwell was like neo soul. Maxwell and D'Angelo both like they branded as like neo soul artists. But Angie Stone and somebody else would be good as well. Angie Stone and I'm not sure who. That'd be a good one also. All right. We have to get out of here. Remember, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow.